The blizzard descended upon the mountain pass with such ferocity that Felicity Porter could no longer see her own hands stretched out before her face, and she knew with terrible certainty that Marcus Wade had left her to die. She had paid the man handsomely to guide her through the Sangre de Cristo Mountains from Santa Fe to Pinos Altos, New Mexico, where her brother ran a mining operation. It was December 1881, and she had arrived in the territory only 3 weeks prior from Philadelphia, armed with determination and a trunk full of impractical dresses. Her brother's letter had been urgent. He needed help managing the accounts for his silver claim, and Felicity, at 23 years old and possessed of an uncommon talent for figures, had seized the opportunity to escape the suffocating parlors of Eastern society. Marcus Wade had come recommended by the hotel proprietor in Santa Fe. A rough-looking man with tobacco-stained teeth and shifty eyes, he had nevertheless seemed competent enough when they set out 2 days ago. The weather had been clear then, crisp and bright, with the kind of blue sky that made the snow-capped peaks look close enough to touch. They had made good progress that first day, camping in a sheltered canyon where Wade built a fire and cooked beans in silence. The second day had started well enough, but by afternoon, the wind had picked up, carrying with it the scent of snow. Wade had grown increasingly nervous, urging his horse forward at a pace that left Felicity struggling to keep up. When the first flakes began to fall, he had looked back at her with something like panic in his eyes. "We need to find shelter," he had shouted over the rising wind. But there was no shelter, only the narrow trail winding through stands of pine and aspen, the trees already bowing under the weight of accumulating snow. The storm had struck with shocking speed, transforming the world into a whirling white chaos. Felicity's horse had stumbled on the increasingly treacherous path, and she had dismounted, thinking to lead the animal more carefully. That was when Wade had disappeared. One moment he had been ahead of her, a dark shape barely visible through the curtain of snow. The next moment, there was nothing. She had called out, her voice swallowed by the wind. She had waited, shivering, certain he would return. But minutes had stretched into what might have been an hour, and she had been forced to accept the truth. He had abandoned her. Perhaps he thought she would slow him down too much, that his own survival depended on leaving her behind. Perhaps he simply did not care. Her horse, sensing her fear, or perhaps possessed of better survival instincts than its rider, had pulled free from her numb fingers and bolted into the storm. Felicity had tried to follow, but within minutes she had lost all sense of direction. The world had become a bewildering maze of white, the wind screaming in her ears, the cold seeping through her wool coat and layers of petticoats with relentless efficiency. She stumbled forward because stopping seemed like death, but she had no idea if she was moving towards safety or simply wandering deeper into the wilderness. Her feet, clad in leather boots that had seemed so practical in Philadelphia, had lost all feeling. Her hands, even inside her gloves, were wooden and clumsy. Ice formed on her eyelashes, making it even harder to see. Felicity had always prided herself on her practical nature, but nothing in her education had prepared her for this. She knew about literature and mathematics, could play the piano and paint watercolors, could manage a household budget and engage in polite conversation. But she knew nothing about surviving a mountain blizzard, nothing about reading the land or finding shelter or keeping warm when the temperature plummeted and the wind tried to strip the very life from her bones. She fell, her legs simply giving out beneath her. The snow was soft, almost welcoming. She struggled to her feet, driven by some deep instinct that told her to keep moving, but she fell again almost immediately. This time, it was harder to rise. The cold was no longer painful. Instead, a strange warmth was spreading through her limbs, and with it came an overwhelming desire to rest, just for a moment, just to catch her breath. Felicity curled on her side in the snow, tucking her hands beneath her arms. She thought of her brother, waiting for her in Pinos Altos. She thought of her mother, who had wept when Felicity announced her intention to travel west. She thought, strangely, of all the things she would never do, all the experiences she would never have. She had never been in love, had never felt the kind of passion she read about in novels. The young men of Philadelphia society had bored her, with their talk of inheritances and social connections. She had thought, perhaps, that the West might offer something different, something more real. The irony that she would die here, alone in the snow, having never found whatever it was she was looking for, struck her as particularly cruel. The cold was inside her now, settling into her bones, slowing her thoughts. She stopped shivering, which some distant part of her mind recognized as a bad sign. The wind continued its relentless howl, piling snow over her prone form. She tried to keep her eyes open, but her eyelids were so heavy. It would be easier to sleep, so much easier. She did not hear the horse approaching, did not see the tall figure that dismounted and crouched beside her. She was already drifting in that space between consciousness and oblivion, where the cold no longer mattered, and nothing could touch her. Russell Zane had been working his trapline when the storm hit, and he had immediately turned his horse toward home, trusting Ranger's instincts to find the way even when visibility dropped to nothing. He had lived in these mountains for 5 years, ever since he had left Texas, and the memories of the war that still haunted him. He was 30 years old, and he had learned to prefer solitude to the company of his fellow men. The mountains offered a kind of peace, or at least a respite from the ghosts that followed him. He had built his cabin in a sheltered valley a few miles from Pinos Altos, close enough to the town to sell his furs and buy supplies, but far enough away that visitors were rare. That was how he liked it. Ranger, his bay gelding, was steady and reliable, qualities Russell had learned to value more than flash or speed. When the horse balked and refused to move forward, tossing his head and whickering nervously, Russell paid attention. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around his face. He dismounted, leading the horse forward carefully. That was when he saw the shape in the snow, nearly buried already. For a moment he thought it might be a deer or elk that had succumbed to the cold, but as he knelt beside it, he saw the unmistakable outline of a human form. Russell brushed away the snow, revealing a woman's face, pale as death, her lips blue, her eyelashes thick with ice. He pulled off his glove and pressed his fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint and thready, but there. She was alive, barely. He did not waste time wondering what she was doing out here alone in a blizzard. That could wait. Right now she needed warmth, and she needed it fast. His cabin was perhaps 20 minutes away in good conditions, closer to 40 in this storm, but it was her only chance. Russell lifted her from the snow, surprised by how light she was, how fragile she felt in his arms. He managed to hoist her onto Ranger's saddle, then swung up behind her, holding her against his chest. She was limp and unresponsive, her head lolling against his shoulder. He wrapped his coat around her as best he could, trying to shield her from the wind, then urged Ranger forward. The ride back to the cabin was a nightmare of cold and disorientation. Even knowing these mountains as well as he did, Russell found himself doubting the path, second-guessing every turn. But Ranger was sure, footed and determined, pushing through drifts that came up to his chest, following some internal compass that Russell had learned to trust completely. When the cabin finally materialized out of the swirling white, Russell felt a surge of relief so intense it was almost painful. He dismounted carefully, lifting the woman down and carrying her to the door. He had to kick it open, his hands too full to manage the latch, and then they were inside, out of the wind at last. The cabin was cold, the fire having died down to embers hours ago, but it was shelter. Russell laid the woman on the floor near the hearth, then quickly set about building up the fire. He had plenty of wood stacked inside, a habit born of experience with mountain winters. Within minutes, flames were licking at the kindling, spreading to the larger logs, filling the single room with flickering light. Only then did Russell take a proper look at the woman he had rescued. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with delicate features and dark hair that had come loose from its pins. Her clothes, what he could see of them beneath the snow-crusted coat, were of good quality, the kind of clothing worn by wealthy Eastern women who had no business being in the mountains in winter. Her lips were still blue, her skin waxen and cold to the touch. Russell had seen frostbite before, had treated it in himself and others. He knew the danger, knew that warming her too quickly could be as fatal as leaving her in the cold. But he also knew that she needed warmth, needed it desperately. He removed her wet coat, his movements efficient and impersonal despite the intimacy of the act. Her dress beneath was damp with melted snow, and he hesitated only a moment before beginning to work the buttons free. Modesty would not save her life. Warmth would. He stripped away the layers of wet clothing, trying to maintain what dignity he could, while acknowledging the necessity of the situation. When she was down to her chemise and drawers, both blessedly dry against her skin, he wrapped her in every blanket he owned, then carried her closer to the fire. Russell filled a pot with snow and set it to melt over the flames. He would need warm water, not hot, to help bring her temperature up gradually. While he waited, he examined her hands and feet, looking for signs of frostbite. Her fingers were pale and cold, but the skin looked intact. Her feet were another matter. When he removed her boots, he found her stockings frozen to her skin. He worked them free as gently as he could, wincing at the sight of her toes, white and hard-looking. He had saved a man's foot once, after a night spent trapped in a snowstorm. It had taken hours of careful warming, massaging, to encourage blood flow, and a good bit of luck. This woman's feet did not look as bad as that man's had, but they were still in danger. Russell poured some of the warm water into a basin, testing the temperature with his elbow. It was barely lukewarm, but that was deliberate. He immersed her feet carefully, watching for any reaction. She did not stir. Her breathing was so shallow, he had to lean close to feel it against his cheek. "Come on," he said quietly. "You did not survive that storm just to give up now." He did not know why he spoke to her. She could not hear him, but the words felt necessary, as though they might anchor her somehow, remind her unconscious mind that she was not alone anymore. Russell worked through the night, changing the water as it cooled, gradually increasing the temperature. He massaged her feet and hands, trying to encourage circulation. He held warm water to her lips, managing to get a few drops into her mouth. He kept the fire blazing, filling the cabin with heat. Somewhere around midnight, she began to shiver. Russell, who had been nodding off in his chair, jerked awake at the movement. Shivering was good. It meant her body was trying to warm itself, meant she was coming back from the edge of hypothermia. He added another blanket to the pile covering her, then moved to check her feet. The skin was pink now, no longer that frightening white. She would likely keep her toes, though they would probably hurt like the devil when full sensation returned. He heated broth made from dried beef and vegetables, managing to get some of it down her throat a spoonful at a time. She swallowed reflexively, though her eyes remained closed. Her shivering intensified, her whole body trembling beneath the blankets. Russell knew this was a good sign, but it was hard to watch. He moved her closer to the fire, then, after a moment's hesitation, lay down beside her, adding his own body heat to the warmth of the fire and blankets. It was purely practical, he told himself. She needed warmth, and he could provide it. There was nothing improper about it, not when a life hung in the balance. But he was intensely aware of her presence beside him, of the soft sound of her breathing, of the way she instinctively curled toward his warmth. Dawn was breaking, gray light filtering through the cabin's single window, when her eyes finally opened. She stared at the unfamiliar ceiling for a long moment, her expression confused. Then her gaze shifted, finding Russell's face inches from her own, and her eyes widened in alarm. "It is all right," Russell said quickly, starting to move away. "You are safe. I found you in the snow. You were freezing." She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a croak. Russell reached for the cup of water he had kept beside the fire, helping her to sit up enough to drink. She swallowed carefully, wincing as though her throat hurt. "Where am I?" she finally managed. "My cabin, about 5 miles north of Pinos Altos. I am Russell Zane. I found you on the trail yesterday during the storm." Her hand went to her throat, her eyes showing confusion as memory returned. "Marcus, he left me. The storm came, and he just disappeared." "Your guide?" Russell felt anger stir in his chest. What kind of man abandoned a woman in a blizzard? "Yes, I hired him in Santa Fe to bring me to Pinos Altos. When the storm hit, he vanished. I thought perhaps he went ahead to find shelter, but he never came back." "He left you to die," Russell said flatly. Tears welled in her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. "I suppose he did. I was slowing him down. He probably thought he would have a better chance alone. A man worth anything would not have left you." She looked at him properly then, taking in his dark hair, which hung past his shoulders, his tanned face, his gray eyes that were studying her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of how little she was wearing. "My clothes," she said, her face flushing. "They were wet. You would have died if I had left them on you. They are drying by the fire." Russell gestured to where her dress and petticoats hung from a line he had strung across the cabin. "I tried to preserve your modesty as much as possible, but saving your life took precedence. I understand. Thank you. For saving me, I mean. I thought I was going to die out there." Her voice broke slightly on the last words. Russell stood, needing to put some distance between them. You are Felicity Porter, I assume. Your brother has been asking around town about you. He expected you days ago. You know Thomas? I sell him furs sometimes. He is a decent man, one of the few at that mining camp who does not try to cheat you. Russell moved to the stove, ladling more broth into a cup. You need to eat. You need to get your strength back. Felicity accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping her hands around it to absorb its warmth. She felt as though she would never be truly warm again, as though the cold had settled permanently into her bones. But the broth was hot and savory, and she could feel it spreading warmth through her chest as she sipped. How long was I out there? She asked. Hard to say. When I found you, you were nearly buried. Another hour, and I never would have seen you. She shuddered at the thought. I was so stupid. I should have been more careful choosing a guide. I should have waited for better weather. I should have... You could not have known he would abandon you, Russell interrupted. That kind of cowardice is not something you can predict. Still, I was foolish. My mother warned me that the West was dangerous, that a woman alone would be vulnerable. I thought I was being brave and independent. Instead, I nearly got myself killed. Russell poured himself coffee, his movements economical and practiced. The West is dangerous, but it is also full of opportunity, of freedom. You were not wrong to come here. You were just unlucky in your choice of guide. Felicity studied him over the rim of her cup. He was unlike any man she had ever met. There was a quietness to him, a self-contained quality that suggested he was comfortable with solitude. But there was also a competence in everything he did, from the way he tended the fire to the way he moved around the cabin. This was a man who could take care of himself, who needed nothing from the world beyond these walls. You live out here alone? She asked. I prefer it that way. That must be lonely. Russell shrugged. Loneliness is preferable to the alternative. There was a weight to those words, a hint of some past pain that he kept carefully locked away. Felicity wanted to ask, but she sensed that Russell Zane was not a man who shared his history easily. The storm continued through the day and into the next night. Russell made a pallet for Felicity near the fire and took to sleeping in his chair, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. She protested that she should not take his bed, but he pointed out that there was only the one pallet and she needed to stay close to the fire. Besides, he said, he had slept in worse places. Felicity's feet and hands pained her terribly as sensation returned, a burning ache that made her gasp. Russell brought snow, wrapping it in cloth and applying it to ease the inflammation. He was gentle with her, his touch careful and impersonal, but Felicity found herself intensely aware of him nonetheless. She watched the way firelight played across his features, the way his hair fell forward when he bent over the cookpot, the quiet strength in his movements. On the second day, when the storm finally began to ease, Felicity was able to stand and move around the cabin, though her feet were still tender. She insisted on helping with the chores, needing to feel useful. Russell showed her how to make biscuits in the cast-iron skillet, how to brew coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. They worked in companionable silence, moving around each other in the small space. Tell me about yourself, Felicity said as they sat down to eat that evening. How did you come to be living alone in these mountains? Russell was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, I was in Texas before this. After the war, I could not settle back into regular life. Too many ghosts. I needed space, needed quiet. I came west and kept going until I found a place that felt right. This valley, with the mountains all around, it felt like a good place to stop. The war, Felicity said softly. That must have been terrible. It was. He did not elaborate, and she did not push. I came here to help my brother, she offered, but also to escape. Philadelphia society felt like a cage. I wanted something more, something real. Does that make sense? It does. Russell looked at her across the table, and for the first time, she saw something other than polite concern in his eyes. There was understanding there, and perhaps a hint of curiosity. You are brave to have come so far on your own. I did not feel brave when I was freezing to death in the snow. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite the fear. Russell stood, collecting their plates. You chose to come here even though you knew it would be difficult. That takes strength. Felicity felt warmth spread through her chest, and it had nothing to do with the fire. She watched Russell wash the dishes in a basin of warm water, his movements methodical. She wanted to know more about him, wanted to understand the shadows that sometimes crossed his face. But she also sensed that pushing would only make him retreat further behind his walls. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue against the white landscape. The storm had left several feet of new snow, transforming the world into a pristine wonderland. Russell announced that the trail would be passable by afternoon if the sun continued to warm things up. He would take her to Pinos Altos, reunite her with her brother. Felicity should have been relieved. She had been anxious about Thomas, knowing he would be worried sick about her. But instead, she felt a strange reluctance to leave the cabin, to leave Russell. In the 3 days she had spent here, she had felt more at ease than she could remember feeling in years. There was something about the simplicity of life here, the focus on immediate needs rather than social expectations, that appealed to her deeply. And then there was Russell himself. He intrigued her in a way no man ever had. Beneath his quiet exterior, she sensed depths of feeling, wounds that had never fully healed. She wanted to know his story, wanted to understand what had driven him to seek solitude in these mountains. They set out mid-afternoon, with Felicity riding behind Russell on Ranger. Her own horse was long gone, likely dead or taken shelter somewhere to wait out the storm. Russell had lent her dry clothes, a pair of his trousers, and a wool shirt that hung loose on her frame. She had protested initially, but he had pointed out that her dress was still damp and entirely impractical for riding. The trousers felt strange but liberating, allowing her to move with a freedom her skirts had never permitted. The ride to Pinos Altos was slow going, with Ranger picking his way carefully through the deep snow. Russell navigated without apparent effort, reading the land with a skill that Felicity envied. He pointed out landmarks as they went, teaching her to recognize the signs that indicated direction and distance. She leaned against his back, feeling the warmth of him through his coat, and tried to memorize the feel of it, knowing she might never be this close to him again. Pinos Altos was a rough mining camp clinging to the hillside, a collection of wooden buildings and tents clustered around the silver claims that had drawn prospectors from across the country. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, and even from a distance, Felicity could hear the sounds of industry, the clanging of metal on rock, the shouts of men. They rode straight to the building that served as Thomas's office and living quarters. Russell had barely reined in when the door flew open and her brother emerged, his face a mask of relief and anger. "Felicity! Good God, where have you been? I have had every man in camp out looking for you." Thomas pulled her down from the horse, hugging her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I got caught in the storm. My guide abandoned me." Felicity hugged him back, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I am sorry I worried you." "Abandoned you? That bastard Wade?" Thomas's expression turned murderous. "He came through here 2 days ago, claimed you had decided to turn back to Santa Fe. I thought it was strange, but he seemed so certain. If I had known—" "Russell saved me," Felicity interrupted, turning to where Russell still sat on his horse, looking uncomfortable with the emotional scene. "He found me in the snow and took me to his cabin. He saved my life." Thomas looked up at Russell, and his expression shifted to one of genuine gratitude. "Zane, I should have known. Thank you. I am in your debt." "No debt," Russell said quietly. "Anyone would have done the same. We both know that is not true. Wade certainly did not." Thomas kept one arm around Felicity's shoulders, as though afraid she might disappear if he let go. "Come inside, both of you. You must be frozen. I have coffee and whiskey, and Felicity, I have a room prepared for you. It is not fancy, but it is warm and dry." Russell shook his head. "I should be getting back. I have animals to tend to." "At least come in for coffee," Felicity said quickly. "Please, I have not properly thanked you." Something in her voice must have reached him, because Russell nodded and dismounted. He followed them inside, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. The interior was rough but functional, with a desk covered in ledgers and papers, a stove radiating heat, and a couple of worn chairs. A doorway led to what Felicity assumed was the living quarters. Thomas poured coffee liberally laced with whiskey, pressing cups into their hands. He insisted on hearing the whole story, and Felicity recounted it, though she glossed over the worst moments, not wanting to relive the terror of being alone in the storm. Russell added details here and there, his voice quiet but authoritative. When the tale was finished, Thomas shook his head in disgust. "Wade will answer for this. I will make sure of it." "Let it go," Russell advised. Men like that have a way of getting what they deserve without help. Perhaps. But I will make sure every mining camp in the territory knows what he did. He will never work as a guide again. Russell drained his coffee and stood. I really should go. The days are short this time of year, and I want to get back before dark. Felicity stood as well, suddenly desperate to delay his departure. Will you come to town again? I would like to see you, to thank you properly. Russell looked at her, and for a moment, something flickered in his gray eyes. Then his expression shuddered again. I come in for supplies sometimes. I am sure we will cross paths. It was a polite nothing, the kind of thing people said when they had no intention of following through. Felicity felt a pang of disappointment so sharp it startled her. She had known this man for 3 days. Why did the thought of not seeing him again feel like losing something precious? Russell, she said, stepping closer. Thank you, truly. You saved my life, and I will never forget that. You are welcome, Miss Porter. He put his hat back on, nodding to Thomas. Porter. And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a quiet click. Felicity stood staring at it, feeling as though something important had just slipped through her fingers. Thomas put a hand on her shoulder. You all right, Lissy? She had not heard that childhood nickname in years. I am fine, just tired. Come on, let me show you your room. You can rest, and later we will have a proper meal. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house has been bringing me food. She is a good cook, much better than I am. Felicity followed her brother through the doorway, into a surprisingly cozy living space. 2 rooms opened off a small sitting area. One clearly Thomas's bedroom, and the other set up as a guest room. The bed looked impossibly inviting, piled with quilts and pillows. I will leave you to rest, Thomas said. But Lissy, I am so glad you are safe. When Wade said you had gone back, I had this terrible feeling. I kept thinking I should go after you, make sure. I should have trusted that instinct. You could not have known. I am here now, and I am fine. She hugged him again. I will help you with the accounts, just as I promised. But first, I think I need to sleep for a week. Thomas laughed. Take all the time you need. The accounts will still be waiting. Alone in the guest room, Felicity changed into the nightgown Thomas had laid out for her, one of several items of clothing he had purchased in anticipation of her arrival. She climbed into bed, expecting to fall asleep immediately. Instead, she found herself staring at the ceiling, her mind full of gray eyes and quiet strength. She had come west looking for something, though she had not been able to name it. Purpose, perhaps. Freedom. A sense of being truly alive. In those 3 days in Russell's cabin, she had felt all of those things. She had felt seen in a way she never had before, as though Russell looked past the surface and recognized something essential in her. The thought of only seeing him occasionally in town, of polite nods and empty pleasantries, was unbearable. But what could she do? She could hardly chase after a man who clearly preferred solitude. He had saved her life out of decency, not because he felt any particular connection to her. Except, she thought, remembering the way he had looked at her over the dinner table, the understanding in his voice when she spoke of feeling caged. She thought perhaps he had felt something too. Or was that just wishful thinking? Felicity finally drifted into uneasy sleep, her dreams full of snow and firelight and a quiet voice saying her name. She woke to find the sun setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She dressed in one of the simple cotton dresses Thomas had bought, then ventured out into the main room. Her brother was at his desk, frowning over a ledger. The accounts? She asked. Yes, they are a mess, I am afraid. I am good at finding silver, but numbers have never been my strong suit. Thomas looked up, smiling. You look better, more rested. I feel better. Felicity moved to look over his shoulder at the ledger. Show me what you have been doing. They spent the evening going over the books, and Felicity quickly identified several problems with Thomas's system. He had been too generous with credit, allowing men to run up debts they had no hope of paying. He had also been lax about tracking expenses, with the result that he had only a vague idea of whether the mine was actually profitable. You need better organization, Felicity said, making notes on a piece of paper. And you need to be more careful about credit. I know you want to help the men, but you cannot do that if you run yourself into bankruptcy. I knew you would be able to sort this out. Thomas leaned back in his chair, looking relieved. I just hope you will not find it too dull here. Pinos Altos is not exactly Philadelphia. "Thank goodness for that," Felicity said with feeling. "I have had quite enough of Philadelphia." Over the following days, Felicity settled into a routine. She spent her mornings working on the accounts, establishing a proper bookkeeping system, and tracking down receipts and records that Thomas had stuffed into various drawers. In the afternoons, she explored the town, such as it was. Pinos Altos was rough around the edges, populated mostly by miners and the people who made their living off the miners. But there was also a surprising sense of community, with people looking out for each other in ways that Philadelphia society, for all its Polish, had never managed. She met Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who ran the boarding house, and who had come west with her husband during the gold rush. She met Father Domingo, the elderly priest who held services in a building that served as both church and schoolhouse. She met Mary Whitmore, who ran the general store with her husband and who welcomed Felicity with a warmth that felt genuine. But for all the new people she met, the person Felicity most wanted to see never appeared. Russell did not come to town, and she found herself watching the trail to the north, hoping to catch a glimpse of a bay horse with a dark-haired rider. "You are thinking about Zane," Thomas observed one evening about a week after her arrival. Felicity, who had been staring out the window instead of focusing on the ledger in front of her, started guiltily. "What makes you say that? You have been watching that trail like you expect someone to appear, and you ask about him, you know, casually, as though you were just making conversation. But I am your brother, Lissy. I know when something is on your mind. I just wanted to thank him properly. What I said before, it did not seem like enough. You could ride out to his cabin." Felicity looked at her brother in surprise. "Alone? That would hardly be proper. This is not Philadelphia. Different rules apply out here." Thomas grinned. "Besides, after what you have been through, I think you have earned the right to make your own decisions about propriety. You would not mind? Zane is a good man, a bit of a loner, and he has his demons, but he would never harm you. If you want to see him, go see him." Felicity chewed her lip, thinking, "I would not even know how to find his cabin. I can draw you a map. It is not difficult if you pay attention. And I can lend you a horse. Daisy is steady and reliable." Thomas leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "But Lissy, be careful, not of Zane, but of yourself. Do not mistake gratitude for something deeper." "I know my own heart," Felicity said quietly. "Do you? You have only known him a few days." "Sometimes a few days is enough." Felicity closed the ledger, her mind made up. "I will go tomorrow if the weather holds." The weather did hold, dawning clear and cold. Thomas drew her a detailed map, making her repeat the landmarks back to him until he was satisfied she would not get lost. He saddled Daisy, a placid mare with kind eyes, and watched as Felicity mounted. She was wearing her brother's borrowed trousers again, having discovered that riding astride in a dress was both difficult and dangerous. "Be back before dark," Thomas warned. "If you are not, I will come looking for you." "I will be back," Felicity promised. The ride north was beautiful, the trail winding through pine forests heavy with snow. Felicity followed Thomas's directions carefully, watching for the lightning-struck tree that marked the turnoff to Russell's Valley. When she found it, she felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. What if he did not want to see her? What if he thought she was being forward? But she had not come this far, in more ways than one, to let fear stop her now. Russell's cabin appeared exactly as Thomas had described, a sturdy log structure nestled in a small valley with a stream running through it. Smoke rose from the chimney, and as Felicity approached, she saw a lean-to shelter where Ranger stood alongside a mule. A dog began barking, and a moment later, Russell emerged from the cabin, a rifle in his hands. When he saw her, his expression cycled through surprise, concern, and finally wariness. He leaned the rifle against the cabin wall and walked toward her. "Miss Porter, is everything all right? Is Thomas well?" "Everything is fine. I just wanted to see you." Felicity dismounted, suddenly feeling foolish. What had seemed like a good idea in town now felt presumptuous. "I am sorry for just showing up like this. I should have sent word." "How would you send word? I do not come to town often." Russell gestured toward the cabin. "You rode all this way. The least I can do is offer you coffee." Felicity tied Daisy to the hitching post and followed Russell inside. The cabin looked exactly as she remembered, and the sight of it filled her with a strange sense of homecoming. Russell poured coffee from the pot, that sat perpetually on the stove, handing her a cup. "Your brother let you ride out here alone?" he asked. "He knows I can take care of myself, and he trusts you. Perhaps he should not." "Why? Because you might harm me?" Felicity looked at him directly. "I do not believe that for a moment." Russell turned away, busying himself with stoking the fire. "You should not be here, Miss Porter." "Please, call me Felicity. And why should I not be here?" "Because." He stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say. "Because you are young and well-bred, and you have your whole life ahead of you. You should not waste your time with a man who lives alone in the mountains because he cannot face the world." Felicity set down her coffee cup. "Is that what you think you are doing, hiding?" "I am surviving. There is a difference." "Is there?" She moved closer to him. "Russell, whatever happened to you in the war, whatever ghosts you are running from, they will not disappear just because you hide from them." His jaw tightened. "You do not know what you are talking about." "Then tell me. Help me understand." For a long moment, Russell was silent. Then, as though a dam had broken, the words began to pour out. "I was a sharpshooter. Spent 4 years shooting men I did not know. Men who were just following orders same as me. I was good at it. Too good. By the end, I could not sleep without seeing their faces, every single one of them. I tried to go home to Texas, tried to be normal, but I would hear a loud noise and I would be back in the war, my hands shaking, my heart racing. People would look at me like I was broken, like I was something to be pitied or feared. So you came here," Felicity said softly. "So I came here, where it is quiet, where I do not have to pretend to be something I am not." Russell finally looked at her, and she was struck by the pain in his eyes. "That is why you should not be here, Felicity. I have nothing to offer you. I am just a damaged man trying to find peace." Felicity reached out, taking his hand in hers. His fingers were calloused and strong, and they trembled slightly in her grip. "We are all damaged in one way or another. That does not make us unworthy of connection, of love." "Love." Russell said the word as though it was foreign to him. "You have known me for days. You cannot possibly—" "Cannot what? Feel something for you?" Felicity stepped closer until they were almost touching. "I know what I feel, Russell. From the moment I woke up in this cabin and saw you, I felt it. You saved my life, yes, but it is more than gratitude. You understand me in a way no one else ever has. When I am with you, I feel like I can breathe. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are kind and strong and brave. I know you would rather live alone than risk hurting someone. I know you see yourself as broken, but I do not see you that way. I see a man who survived something terrible and is trying to build a new life." She squeezed his hand. "Let me be part of that life." Russell closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was a vulnerability there that took her breath away. "I am afraid," he admitted. "I have not let anyone close in so long. I do not know if I remember how." "We will figure it out together." Felicity smiled up at him. "That is what people do, is it not? They learn each other. They grow together. You deserve better than this, better than me. I deserve someone who sees me for who I am and values me for it. You do that, Russell. From the first moment, you have treated me as though my thoughts and feelings matter. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Russell reached up with his free hand, touching her face with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "I do not want to hurt you." "Then do not push me away." Felicity leaned into his touch. "Let me in. Let us see where this goes." For a moment, she thought he might argue further. Then he leaned down, and his lips met hers in a kiss that was tentative and sweet and full of longing. Felicity melted into him, her arms going around his neck, and felt something in her chest expand and bloom. This was what she had been searching for. This connection, this sense of rightness, of coming home. When they finally broke apart, Russell rested his forehead against hers. "I do not know how to do this," he whispered. "Neither do I," Felicity whispered back. "But I want to try. Do you?" "Yes." The word came out rough and fervent. "Yes, I do." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking. Russell told her about Texas, about his family, about the war and its aftermath. Felicity told him about Philadelphia, about the suffocating expectations of society, about her dreams of something more, They spoke of books and ideas, of the beauty of the mountains, of small things and large. And with every word, every shared confidence, Felicity felt the connection between them deepen. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Russell said reluctantly, "You should head back. Thomas will worry." "I know." Felicity did not want to leave, but she knew he was right. "Will you come to town soon?" "I will come," Russell promised. "Maybe in a few days. I need to check my trap lines first, but after that, I will come." Felicity stood on her toes, kissing him once more. "I will hold you to that." She rode back to Pinos Altos as the sun set, the sky ablaze with color, her heart singing with joy. She had come west looking for something, and she had found it in the most unexpected place. Not in the mining camp or the mountains, but in a quiet cabin with a man who thought he had nothing to offer. Thomas took one look at her face when she returned and shook his head, smiling. "Well, I guess I have my answer about whether you were just feeling grateful." "I love him," Felicity said simply. "I know it is fast, I know it seems crazy, but I love him." "Then I am happy for you." Thomas hugged her. "Zane is a good man. He will treat you right." Russell came to town 3 days later, riding in mid-morning and heading straight for Thomas's office. Felicity, who had been watching the trail obsessively, saw him coming and met him at the door. "You came," she said, unable to keep the joy from her voice. "I said I would." Russell dismounted, and there was a lightness to his expression that had not been there before. "I was wondering if you might show me around the town. I usually just come in for supplies and leave, but I thought perhaps I should get to know the place better." "You mean get to know the people," Felicity corrected, smiling. "You are tired of hiding." "I am tired of being alone," Russell said quietly. "You showed me that there might be another way to live." They spent the day together, and Felicity introduced Russell to everyone they met. She saw the surprised looks people gave him, the way they reassessed this quiet man who usually kept to himself. And she saw Russell slowly relaxing, engaging in conversation, even smiling occasionally. When they had dinner that evening with Thomas, the conversation flowed easily. Thomas and Russell discussed the mine, the challenges of working a claim in winter, the fluctuating price of silver. Felicity contributed her own observations and was pleased when both men listened to her opinions with real interest. After Thomas retired for the night, Russell and Felicity sat by the stove, talking in low voices. "This was a good day," Russell said. "I did not think I could do this. Be around people, have normal conversations. But with you, it feels possible." "It is possible," Felicity assured him. "You just needed a reason to try." Russell took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. "Will you marry me, Felicity?" The question caught her completely off guard. "What?" "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a short time, but I also know that I do not want to spend another day without you. You have brought light back into my life, and I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." Russell looked at her with an intensity that took her breath away. "Marry me. Come live with me in the cabin. We will build a life together." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Russell kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Felicity felt the last of her doubts melt away. This was right. This was what she had been searching for all along. They were married a week later, in a simple ceremony performed by Father Domingo. Thomas gave her away, and Mrs. Chen and Mary Whitmore stood as witnesses. It was nothing like the elaborate society weddings Felicity had attended in Philadelphia, but it was perfect nonetheless. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the boarding house, with food and music and dancing. Felicity was touched by how many people came, how warmly they welcomed both her and Russell into the community. She had worried that some might judge them for marrying so quickly, but if anyone had reservations, they kept them to themselves. As the sun set, Russell and Felicity rode back to the cabin together, Felicity seated behind him on Ranger, her arms wrapped around his waist. When they arrived, Russell lifted her down and carried her over the threshold, making her laugh. "I am not an invalid," she protested. "Indulge me," Russell said, kissing her. "I have been waiting for this." That night, in the warmth of the cabin with the fire crackling and the snow falling softly outside, they came together as husband and wife. Russell was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience, and Felicity discovered a passion in herself she had not known existed. Afterwards, they lay entwined, and she thought that she had never been so happy, so complete. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Russell replied, his voice full of wonder. "I did not think I would ever say those words again, but here you are, and here I am, and somehow it all makes sense." The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Felicity learned the rhythms of mountain life, how to manage the cabin, how to cook on the wood stove, how to preserve food and mend clothes. She learned to recognize animal tracks in the snow, to tell when a storm was coming by the feel of the air. Russell taught her to shoot, spending hours helping her improve her aim until she could hit a target with reasonable accuracy. She also learned about Russell, about the man beneath the quiet exterior. She learned that he loved poetry, that he had a wry sense of humor, that he sang while he worked, even though he swore he could not carry a tune. She learned about his nightmares, the ones that sometimes woke him gasping in the night, and she held him until the fear passed and he could sleep again. In turn, Russell learned about her quick mind and quicker temper, about her determination and her occasional need for solitude. He read her favorite books so they could discuss them, and he listened with genuine interest when she talked about her dreams of one day opening a school in Pinos Altos, a place where children could learn regardless of their family's ability to pay. They made the trip to town every week or two, sometimes staying overnight with Thomas, sometimes returning to the cabin the same day. Felicity continued to help her brother with the accounts, and gradually she began to take on students, children from the mining camp who wanted to learn reading and arithmetic. She held classes in the church building, and Russell would sit in the back, ostensibly reading, but really watching her with pride in his eyes. By spring, when the snow began to melt and the first wildflowers appeared in the mountain meadows, Felicity realized she was pregnant. She told Russell one evening as they sat outside the cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. He was silent for a moment, and she felt a flutter of nervousness. They had not discussed children, had not planned this, but then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he pulled her into his arms. "A baby," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Felicity asked. Happy does not even begin to cover it. Russell kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "I never thought I would have this. A wife, a child, a real family. You have given me everything, Felicity." "You have given me everything too," she said, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I came west looking for a new life, and I found so much more than I ever dreamed possible." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Felicity's belly swelled, and she felt the baby move, a sensation that never failed to fill her with wonder. Mrs. Chen, who had experience as a midwife, checked on her regularly, pronouncing her healthy and strong. Russell was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worried that Felicity was doing too much. She had to remind him repeatedly that she was pregnant, not made of glass, but she appreciated his concern, even as she teased him about it. In November, a year and a day after Russell had found her in the snow, Felicity went into labor. Thomas rode out to fetch Mrs. Chen, and Russell paced the cabin like a caged animal, alternating between holding Felicity's hand and getting in Mrs. Chen's way. "Out," Mrs. Chen finally ordered, pointing at the door. "You are not helping." "But she needs me," Russell protested. "What she needs is for you to stop hovering and let me work." Mrs. Chen softened her tone. "She will be fine. First babies take time. Go outside, walk, chop wood, do something useful." Russell reluctantly obeyed, though he came back inside every 10 minutes to check on things. Felicity, between contractions, found his anxiety endearing. This man who faced down mountain lions and blizzards without flinching was completely undone by the prospect of childbirth. The labor lasted through the night and into the next day. It was hard and painful, but Mrs. Chen was skilled and patient, guiding Felicity through each stage, and when the baby finally arrived, announced by a lusty cry that filled the cabin, Felicity felt a surge of love so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. "A boy," Mrs. Chen announced, placing the squirming bundle on Felicity's chest. "A healthy, beautiful boy." Russell, who had been allowed back inside for the final moments, stared at his son with an expression of absolute awe. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is," Felicity agreed, running her finger over the baby's downy head. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son's tiny face, Russell said, "What about Samuel? It was my father's name. He was a good man, would have loved to meet his grandson." "Samuel Zane," Felicity said, trying it out. "I like it. Samuel it is." The weeks after Samuel's birth were exhausting and magical in equal measure. Felicity marveled at how such a tiny person could completely reorganize their lives, how every moment now revolved around feeding and changing and soothing the baby. But she also marveled at the love she felt, a fierce protective instinct unlike anything she had ever experienced. Russell was a devoted father, spending hours just watching Samuel sleep, talking to him in a soft voice, carrying him around the cabin to show him various objects as though the infant could understand his explanations. He fashioned a cradle from wood, carved with intricate designs, and placed it near the fire where Samuel could stay warm. When Samuel was a few months old and the weather was mild, they made the trip to town to have him baptized. Father Domingo performed the ceremony, with Thomas and Mrs. Chen standing as godparents. There was another celebration afterwards, and Felicity watched as Russell held Samuel, showing him off with unmistakable pride. "You look happy," Thomas observed, coming to stand beside Felicity. "I am happy, happier than I ever thought possible." Felicity smiled at her brother. "Thank you for encouraging me to come west. I know Mother was against it, but you understood what I needed. I wanted you to have the chance to find your own path. I just did not expect that path would lead to Zane." Thomas grinned. "But I am glad it did. You are good for each other." The years passed, measured in seasons and milestones. Samuel grew from infant to toddler, taking his first steps in the cabin and saying his first words. Felicity taught him his letters, and Russell taught him about the mountains, about tracking and hunting and respecting the land. When Samuel was 3, Felicity gave birth to a daughter, whom they named Rose after Russell's mother. She had Felicity's dark hair and Russell's gray eyes, and from the beginning she was fearless, getting into everything and keeping her parents constantly on their toes. 2 years after Rose came another son, William, called Will for short. He was quieter than his siblings, thoughtful and observant, with a love of books that delighted Felicity. The cabin grew crowded with 3 children, and Russell spent a summer expanding it, adding 2 more rooms and a proper loft. Felicity's school had also grown, and she now taught a dozen students of varying ages. Thomas, who had sold his silver claim for a tidy profit, had helped fund a proper schoolhouse, and Felicity held classes there 3 days a week. Russell had gradually become more involved in the community, serving on the town council and helping to settle disputes. He never entirely lost his preference for quiet and solitude, but he had learned to balance that need with his responsibilities to his family and neighbors. On winter evenings, with the children asleep and the cabin warm and quiet, Russell and Felicity would sit by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes Russell would have nightmares still, but they were less frequent now, and Felicity's presence always helped him find his way back to peace. "Do you ever regret it?" Russell asked one such evening. "Giving up the life you could have had in Philadelphia?" "Never," Felicity said firmly. "That was not a life, Russell. It was a sort of slow suffocation. This is living. This is real. Even with the hardships, the isolation, the hard work, the constant worry about money and weather and 100 other things, even with all of that," Felicity leaned against him. "I would rather face hardship with you than live in luxury without you. Besides, we have built something good here. We have each other, we have our children, we have a community. What more could I possibly want?" Russell kissed the top of her head. "I ask because sometimes I still cannot quite believe my luck, that you chose me, that you have stayed with me all these years. I was so lost when you came into my life, Felicity. I thought I was managing, thought I had found a way to survive, but I was just existing. You taught me how to live again." "You taught me what love really means," Felicity countered. "Not the shallow affection dressed up in social niceties that I saw in Philadelphia, but real love, the kind that grows stronger through shared struggles, that deepens over time, the kind that makes you want to be better, do better." "We have been fortunate," Russell agreed. "Not everyone gets a second chance at happiness. Not everyone finds someone who understands them so completely. We found each other because we were both brave enough to take a risk. You could have kept yourself closed off, could have sent me away when I rode out to your cabin that day. I could have stayed in Philadelphia, married some suitable man, lived a safe and boring life. But we both chose differently. We chose each other, and we kept choosing each other every day after that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the firelight dance across the walls. Then Felicity said, "Do you remember the day you found me in the snow? I remember everything about that day, how terrified I was that I had found you too late, how light you felt in my arms, how cold your skin was. I remember the relief I felt when I finally detected a pulse, and then the fear that you might not survive the night." Russell's arm tightened around her. "I remember thinking that if you died, it would somehow be my fault, even though I had just found you. That is when I realized how much I already cared, even before you woke up. I remember waking up and seeing your face. I was so confused, so disoriented, but I also felt safe. I do not know how to explain it, but even in that first moment, I knew you would not hurt me. I knew I could trust you. It feels like a lifetime ago now. So much has changed." "Everything has changed," Felicity corrected. "That blizzard, as terrible as it was, brought me to you. Marcus Wade, for all his cowardice in abandoning me, inadvertently gave me the greatest gift. If he had brought me safely to Pinos Altos as he was supposed to, you and I might never have met." "I prefer not to give Wade any credit," Russell said dryly. "But I understand what you mean. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. If the war had not damaged me, I never would have come to these mountains. If I had not been here, I never would have found you. So, in a strange way, I am grateful for all of it, even the painful parts, because they led me here." As the fire burned low, they made their way to bed, checking on the children as they passed. Samuel was sprawled across his bed, one arm flung over the side. Rose was curled up with her favorite doll. Will was sleeping peacefully, his face angelic in repose. "They are so beautiful," Felicity whispered. "They get that from you," Russell said, and she elbowed him gently. In their own bed, they held each other close, and Felicity thought about the path that had brought her here. The decision to leave Philadelphia, the dangerous journey west, the terrifying hours in the blizzard, the quiet cabin where she had found not just shelter, but love. Every step, even the missteps, had been necessary. The years continued to unfold in a tapestry of ordinary moments and extraordinary love. Samuel grew tall and strong, with his father's quiet competence and his mother's quick mind. He decided he wanted to be a doctor, and, at 18, left for medical school in Denver, promising to return to Pinos Altos to practice. Rose was 16 and full of fire, determined to study law, despite everyone telling her that was not a field for women. Felicity and Russell encouraged her ambitions, having learned long ago that their daughter could not be dissuaded once she set her mind to something. Will, at 14, was still finding his path. He loved the mountains as his father did, but he also loved learning as his mother did. He talked about being a teacher or perhaps a writer, documenting the history of the region before it was forgotten. One evening in late autumn, when the aspens had turned gold and the air carried the promise of winter, Russell and Felicity took a walk together, following the stream that ran through their valley. They walked in comfortable silence, hands clasped, until they reached a spot where the water pooled into a small pond. "Do you remember when I first brought you here?" Russell asked. "You were recovering from the frostbite, and you insisted on walking even though your feet still hurt. You saw this pond and said it was the most beautiful thing you had ever seen." "It still is," Felicity said, looking at the golden leaves reflected in the still water. "This whole valley, this life we have built, it is all beautiful." "We have had a good run," Russell observed. "We are not done yet. We have many years ahead of us." Felicity squeezed his hand. "Many more moments like this. Many more adventures." "Adventures," Russell smiled. "When did we become the kind of people who have adventures?" "We always were. We just did not realize it at first." Felicity turned to face him. "What are you thinking about? You have that look, the one you get when something is on your mind." Russell reached up, touching her face with the same gentleness he had shown all those years ago when she first woke in his cabin. "I was thinking about how grateful I am, for you, for our children, for this life. I was thinking about the man I was before I met you, closed off and haunted, convinced I did not deserve happiness. And I was thinking about the man I am now, and how every good thing in my life traces back to that day in the blizzard when I found you. I am the one who should be grateful, Felicity said, her eyes shining with tears. You saved my life, Russell, not just from the cold, but from a life that would have slowly killed my spirit. You gave me freedom and purpose and a love deeper than I knew existed. We saved each other, Russell said simply. That is what love does. It saves us and heals us and makes us whole. They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The pond reflected the sunset, turning the water to liquid fire, and in the distance, a wolf howled, a lonesome sound that was also somehow beautiful. As they walked back to the cabin, they talked about the future, about Samuel finishing medical school and coming home, about Rose going to university, though it would be a fight to find one that would accept a female student, about Will and his dreams of documenting history, about the possibility of grandchildren someday, though that was still years away. Whatever comes, we will face it together, Felicity said as they reached the cabin door. Together, Russell agreed. Always together. Inside, the cabin was warm and welcoming, filled with the smells of dinner cooking and the sound of their younger children arguing about something trivial. It was home in every sense of the word, a place of love and safety and belonging. That night, after the children were in bed, Felicity sat at the table working on lessons for her students while Russell repaired a harness by lamplight. It was an ordinary evening, unremarkable in every way except for the contentment that filled the space between them. Read me what you are working on, Russell said after a while. Felicity picked up the paper in front of her. It is a lesson about westward expansion. I am trying to explain to the students about how people came here, what drove them. I want them to understand that it was not just about gold or land, though those were certainly factors. It was also about hope, about the belief that you could build a better life if you were brave enough to try. That is what brought you here, Russell observed. Yes, and I want the children to know that the West was built by people like that. Ordinary people who took extraordinary risks because they believed in something better. People like you and me. Russell smiled. I am not sure I would call us ordinary. We are, though. That is the beautiful thing. We are just two people who found each other and chose to build a life together. There is nothing extraordinary about that, except that we did it with love and determination and a willingness to face whatever came our way. Write that, Russell suggested. Write it exactly like that. The children should know that you do not have to be special to do something meaningful. You just have to be brave and stubborn and willing to keep going even when things are hard. Felicity added a note to her paper, then set down her pen. You should write your story someday, about the war, about coming here, about finding peace. It would help people understand. Maybe I will, Russell said, though they both knew he probably would not. He was a man of action, not words. But the fact that he was willing to consider it, that he no longer hid from his past, was progress. The seasons turned again, bringing winter snows and spring thaws, summer heat and autumn color. Samuel returned from medical school and set up practice in Pinos Altos, fulfilling his promise to serve the community. Rose left for university, her determination finally rewarded when a progressive school in California agreed to accept her. Will decided to stay close to home, teaching at his mother's school while working on a comprehensive history of the region. Russell and Felicity grew older, their hair turning gray, their movements a bit slower, but the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it deepened, enriched by decades of shared experience and unwavering commitment. One winter evening, nearly 20 years after they had first met, Russell and Felicity sat by the fire, alone in the cabin for the first time in what felt like forever. Samuel was at his own house with his new bride. Rose was still at university. Will was in town, having dinner with a young woman he was courting. It is quiet, Felicity observed. Too quiet? Russell asked. No, just different. Felicity leaned against him. I love our children, but I also love these moments with just you. They remind me of how this all started, just the two of us in this cabin. Do you miss those early days? Sometimes. Everything felt so intense then, so urgent. We were still discovering each other, still learning how to be together. Felicity smiled. But I would not trade what we have now for anything. There is something to be said for the comfort of knowing someone completely, of being known completely in return. I never get tired of you, Russell said, After all these years, you still surprise me. You still make me laugh. You still challenge me to be better. Good. I would hate to become boring. You could never be boring. Russell kissed her forehead. You are the most interesting person I have ever known. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind howl outside. Then Felicity said, "Tell me again about the day you found me. You know that story. I know, but I like hearing you tell it. I like remembering how it felt, that moment when everything changed." Russell settled back, pulling her closer. It was the worst storm I had seen in years. The wind was howling, the snow coming down so thick I could barely see Ranger's ears. I was trying to get home, trusting him to find the way, when he stopped. He would not move forward, kept tossing his head. So I dismounted to see what the problem was, and that is when I saw you, just a shape in the snow. I thought you might be dead, but I checked anyway, and there was a pulse, faint, but there. What did you think when you realized I was alive? I was terrified that I would not be able to get you back to the cabin in time, that you would die on the way. Terrified that even if I got you there, I would not know how to save you. Russell's arm tightened around her, but I also felt this strange sense of purpose, like finding you meant something, like I was supposed to be there in that exact moment. You were supposed to be there, Felicity said firmly. We were supposed to find each other. I believe that. I do too. I did not at first. At first I just thought it was chance, random luck. But over the years, I have come to believe that some things are meant to be. We were meant to be. Felicity turned in his arms, looking up at him. I love you, Russell Zane. I have loved you from almost the moment I met you, and I will love you until my last breath. I love you too, Felicity Porter Zane. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Russell kissed her, deep and tender, a kiss that held 20 years of love and devotion. When they finally pulled apart, Felicity rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Do you ever think about what might have happened if you had not found me that day? If you had taken a different path, or if Ranger had not stopped? I try not to, Russell admitted. The thought of a world without you in it is too painful. But I also think about how fragile life is, how easily things could have gone differently. It makes me appreciate what we have even more. We should make sure the children know how much we love each other, Felicity said, how much work we put into building this relationship. I do not want them to think it was easy or automatic. I want them to understand that love is a choice you make every day. They know, Russell assured her. They see it in how we treat each other, how we work together, how we navigate disagreements. We have shown them what a real partnership looks like. As the fire burned low, they made their way to bed, still wrapped in each other's arms. And as Felicity drifted off to sleep, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, from Philadelphia to the mountains of New Mexico, from a life of quiet desperation to one of profound meaning and joy. She had been abandoned in a blizzard by a cowardly guide, left to die in the snow, but she had been found by a cowboy who had thawed her frozen body gently by the fire, and, in doing so, had thawed her frozen heart as well. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a love story for the ages. And as the years continued to pass, as they grew old together surrounded by children and grandchildren, as they faced the inevitable hardships and celebrated the unexpected joys, that love remained the constant center of their lives. It was the fire that warmed them, the light that guided them, the foundation on which everything else was built. In the end, when Russell and Felicity were old and gray, sitting together on the porch of the cabin they had shared for so many years, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold, they could look back on their lives with satisfaction and gratitude. They had loved well and lived fully, and they had done it together. No regrets? Russell asked, his voice thin with age but still filled with warmth. Not a single one, Felicity replied, squeezing his gnarled hand with her own. You are still the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. They sat there as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars began to emerge. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and had chosen love every single day since. And when their time finally came, years later, they went peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they had lived exactly the life they were meant to live, together from that moment in the blizzard until the very end. Their children buried them side by side in a spot overlooking the valley they had loved, with a simple stone that read, Russell and Felicity Zane, beloved parents and grandparents, who found each other in a storm and built a lifetime of love. The cabin remained in the family, passed down through generations, a testament to what two people could build when they refused to give up on each other or themselves. And on winter nights, when the snow fell and the wind howled through the mountains, some said you could still feel their presence there, in the warmth of the fire and the love that had soaked into the very walls. They had created something that transcended their own lives, a legacy of courage and devotion and unwavering commitment that would inspire their descendants for generations to come. It had all started with a blizzard, a desperate woman, and a lonely cowboy who had saved her life. But it had become so much more than that. It had become a story of redemption and healing, of finding love in the wilderness, of building a family and a community against all odds. It was a story of the American West in all its harsh beauty and unexpected grace, and it was their story, unique and precious and eternal.